Hello, world. What separated your deep ball from everybody else?
My deep ball, it has a little secret sauce to it, man.
Never get too high, never get too low, but just keep moving.
The whole story is Carlos never beat me in any kind of sports in high school.
Welcome, everybody, to the Cincy Jungle Super Show post-draft. I'm Ace Boogie, joined by my Cincy Jungle brethren, Anthony Kazenza, John Sheeran, and Zim Hude. Fellas, how we doing?
That sums it up. Yeah,
that's what the draft does, man. It just takes you just follow it for a total of what, like 18 hours for 3 days, and then you just do all this stuff, and it takes the wind out of you. But it's a months long process, and then it's over, and it's
it feels good to be over. Me personally, I know, like we talked about the Civil War. I was honestly tired of it. I was so ready for the draft to get here. So we could all collectively come together and just unite around these draft picks. And I'm just glad that finally has happened. There's still been some remnants of it still out there, but it's just good to have everybody come together collectively and finally be through the draft. And I think the next thing we're going to be wondering about is OTA's training camp, and then there's that dead season. But it's good to at least have the draft, I think, through, in my opinion, at least.
But no, we're not done, people. Hey, John, we're not done. We got the UDFAs. It's time to really get into this. You just getting started. We got Dylan Moses out there on the street. We got some guys we got to grab up, bro. It's not over.
That's true.
I just put up a post ready to be out there for. They signed like an undrafted cornerback. They signed a punter from Ohio State.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
How about the Steelers? Or I'm sorry, Pittsburgh. The Squealers, how about their punter? Y'all get a load of that guy?
No.
They drafted him in the 7th?
Yeah. He's a big boy. He's a really big boy.
Are you sure it's not Big Ben masquerading as a punter? Are you sure it's not just Ben?
I'm convinced it's his soulmate.
Is that the dude that's all tatted up?
I don't know about his tats, but he got a belly on him, and he's ready to He's ready to do a little bit more than play some football. He's ready to wrestle. He's ready to go to the buffet. He's ready to throw down and eat. So part of my plan is that he goes and eats, and Ben comes back out of shape. They meet up at buffets, and then they come back to the season. Joe's in shape, and we now have a little bit of an edge coming into the season.
But just kicking things off, I guess, like, what are your overall thoughts on just the draft 1 through 7? We'll start with John. What are your thoughts on just like what the Bengals did in this draft? And if you could give a grade for it, I guess everyone can give their grade after you recap your thoughts on it.
Man, the grades. I don't want to say indifferent. I just feel like it's just it's okay. Like, obviously Chase is great. I think Carmen is slightly better than what people give him credit for. I think Asai is one of the better picks in the entire draft for any team. And then the entire 4th round, it's weird because the Bengals don't normally dive into group of 5 players that early. Like, they took Logan Wilson last year out of Wyoming, and that was like the earliest we usually see them like take non-Power 5 players. So them getting Cam Sample and Deontay Smith. I didn't really know a lot about Smith, but I've heard a lot of good things about him. So it was interesting to see them go a different route in that sense, but still address positions of need. And they seem to have a plan, an offensive line. They want to start Carmen at guard, and they want to groom Smith into one of the tackle spots, preferably, I guess, right tackle after Riley Reif moves on. I think that's a fine plan. I just don't know a lot about some of these guys that they invested in. It looked a little bit different. I think it's fine to take McPherson where they did. There's precedent with Jake Elliott, but it does seem now that it's different, and it's not a true competition with Seibert. It's like Seibert's gone. He's just here to stick around for camp and whatnot. And then I think Evans is fine in the 6th round, and Hubert, whatever, 7th rounder. So I think, yeah, if you just want to give it a B minus, that's perfectly fine. But there's still a lot of projection and unknown in this class, and they do probably need to hit on some of those day 3 guys. And it's really just a wait and see situation.
Sam, what were your thoughts on the draft, and what's your overall grade for it?
The draft, I made this little speech and I put it on Twitter not too long ago, and it just was saying that, everybody has a plan. I think John has like a different perspective that I think that I can appreciate that's different than a fan like myself. Whereas I take a dive into players or whatever, but it's more so his job to analyze players more in a deep dive. And even you yourself, Ace, going to and cut the tape on and do like these deep dives. I think everybody has a plan, and we all have a plan, and we all have these guys that we would have did. And even after they executed the trade, which I think is the greatest thing that they did in the draft, I still find myself saying like, damn, let's trade back up and let's go get Creed, or let's go get, this guy, or, and it didn't work out that way. But I will say this, some of the guys that they did get that I absolutely knew nothing about, like the kid from ECU, I think if it's what I'm seeing right now, now that I'm starting to go back, go look at highlights first, go look and see what other people are saying, different things like that, it could prove to be like a B+, maybe A-. But it's so many variables out there on the guys that they pick that it's really hard for me to get a read. And they did this philosophy that a lot of times does not work, where it's like, and the Raiders do this every year. The Seahawks do this every year, where we're going to draft our guy. We don't care what the consensus pick, what the consensus feeling is. And they got to make sure that it works, because the one thing that I was telling you is that they have no room for error with that second round pick. After you go, like me being the leader of Team Chase, you cannot, like the round 2 Carmen, it cannot be like any lingering stuff from no back surgery. It cannot be any of these other stuff, because the public opinion of people like myself are going to be like, what are you thinking? Like you had Dylan Radins, you're going to name, that's when you'll have all these people come back and say, you should have got this guy. You should have got this guy, whatever. So they better know what they're talking about with Carmen, because that's the plan for Team Chase always was the round 2 guy has to start. It has to be, that is a premium pick. There's no room for error. I don't have no time for no projects, none of that stuff. So I think they did themselves a good deal by getting the trade and getting more players in there. And some of the guys like Shelvin, I would have probably went Bobby Brown at that time, or I would have went to some of the 3 techs around that time. And you could say that throughout the whole draft, but it remains to be seen like how it's going to play out. I don't dislike anybody that they got. Whereas, like, I look back at the sample pick or certain picks that stand out to me in the history of Bengals and stuff, it just said I absolutely do not like that pick. I think it's just Carmen where it's at based on what we all thought it was going to be. Coming into the draft, I thought Carmen was like my 6th or 7th option at guard or guard/tackle. So we'll see how it plays out. But overall, a B. I think it has the potential to go A- if Carmen just hits. They just got to hit on one of the 3 out of the defensive up front guys. They got to hit out on 2 out of 3 with the offensive line guys, just because of what they did to get to that point. So that's my overall thought.
Hey, C, what do you think?
Look, I mean, this entire offseason, whether it was in free agency or going into the draft, this was, it's always exciting to get a plethora of wide receivers, the edge players, all that kind of stuff. But this, I've kind of been saying it for a while, this is kind of a meat and potatoes type of draft, and it needed to be. They needed to shore up both lines. They needed to get big bodies on both defense and offense, and they did that. They may not have been some of the bodies that, a lot of us would have picked or were mocking to the team. But there is a possibility in my mind's eye. I was kind of thinking, maybe by 2023, and I know that's a couple years down the road, but the 3 offensive linemen that they drafted this weekend could be starting offensive linemen for them in a year, 2 years right now. If it all pans out. Now that's kind of pie in the sky thinking, meaning you hit on all 3 guys, but I really like Trey Hill. I thought that pick was good value. Joseph Aside,
they had to have.
That was a great pick, man. And I think you got some guard center versatility there. You have potential guard tackle versatility with Carmen. I know he wasn't everybody's favorite. There are some things to work on, but the size and the fact that he played at a big program and they entrusted him to protect one of the best college football quarterbacks that has come out in a very long time at Clemson, protect his blind side, and he did so at a pretty high level. He moves really well for 320 plus pounds, close to 330. The thing I liked about it, he wasn't my favorite guy, and credit to John, because we did listener questions live on Friday afternoon, and he pegged that Jackson Carman pick. Look, the thing I like about it, that was their guy. They could have picked him at 38, and it could have been deemed a reach. It may still be deemed a reach 8 picks later, but they got 2 more picks, and they got more needs taken care of down the road. So I guess how I look at this thing is, yeah, you're kind of going, man, they really stacked up on defensive line. Yeah, they got 3 offensive line, and maybe that's a little overkill. But this team has been absolutely ravaged by injuries, and they need depth, they need bodies, and they need to get after the quarterback, and they need to protect the quarterback. And I think that while it may not be the super all-star names in this year's class, I think they did a pretty solid job. I would give it a B. The thing I do worry about, to Zim's point, the medicals and the other question marks on some of these guys. Chris Evans, really exciting football player. I really like the athletic profile and his ability to potentially contribute, but 16 carries last year? And so you go, okay, that's a big question mark. You already have question marks around everybody because a lot of these guys either opted out or they had limited games last year, as did pretty much the entire college football slate. So then you're throwing in a guy like Carman who's got the back stuff. The medical thing can't come back and bite him. That's the big thing. And these other question marks on some of these, you can't have that bite him. They better be damn sure that these guys are going to be ready to play and contribute early on. So I think I would go BB plus. Yeah, I would go BB plus. I like a lot of what they did, and I like that trade back in the second round. But I don't think it's an absolute home run, but I like a lot of things they did.
No, I saw a comment. Somebody said, we just signed another punter, but we're never going to punt again. So that was kind of a waste. I'm with you.
Apparently, we just signed, I think it was Puka as well, the running back. Puka Williams. Oh, nice. It seems that we just signed him as well. For me, I said it on Twitter. I think it was a A-1 for me, and that's just because I'm kind of in the minority. But when I was talking to Zim, one of the things that we harped on before, like we even had the Civil War, when it was just about wide receiver or best player available, I was like, we got to get the trenches right. We got to get the trenches right in terms of the offensive line, not just the offensive line, but the defensive line as well. Having the Ravens run for a record number of yards on us, and also making that we only had 17 sacks on defense. That was a big deal for me in terms of what they needed to do there. And you look at all of these big, massive bodies that they just spent on the second to the end of the rounds, honestly, the end of the draft, on big linemen, like offensive linemen and defensive linemen and edge rushers. I mean, this was a team that really didn't have any depth. We got rid of Carlos Dunlap. They had to do something. I was texting Khalid Kareem, and even he was saying, like, we need to get more people in there. So to see them go after him and get a guy like Osai, especially in the third round, I think was a steal. And just hearing the story about the Jackson Carman thing, I also, just like John did, like, my last mock draft, just randomly, I just decided to throw Jackson Carman in there. It just was how it fell. And I was like, well, I've heard Willie talk about this guy. And this was before I even talked to Willie. And I was like, well, I'll just throw him in there. He might be a guy to consider. And then on the day that it was about to happen, Willie says, call me. And he's like, yeah, Duke talked to me about him. I gave him a good review. He asked, could he play right guard and tackle and left guard? And I said, yes, he can do that. I've worked with them. They just kind of did their due diligence. And they also talked to, I heard the head coach at Clemson as well. So they did their due diligence on all of these guys. So a lot of that stuff with people just thinking that they just took Jackson Carman just to take him. They did not. They did their due diligence.
If you take Jackson Carman, that's your guy.
Exactly. They talked to Paul Alexander. And at the time, I heard that they were targeting him in the late second round. So that was confusing to me because I had to reach out to Malik Wright and stuff. And I'm like, oh, what did you hear? And he was like, no, I heard 38. And I'm like, that's not what I heard. And so I figured that they were going to make a trade because I was like, we have an early second round pick. I didn't know if they were going to trade back or trade up, but I knew that something was going to happen there. And to see them get the 2 picks with the 4th rounders was just amazing to me. For them to get that value was just crazy. And so I think that really set the tone for the draft for me. hearing Willie Anderson co-sign Jackson Carman, that was all I needed to hear. I'm not an expert offensive line evaluator. I couldn't tell you what great offensive line technique is. I'm not going to lie to you. So when Willie told me that, I was like, cool, I'm sold on it. It's a guy that played for a top program. As Anthony said, Clemson, I'm all in. They loved his video on Chase Young was one thing that they told me as well against Chase Young. So that pretty much sold me on it. And after that, we ended up getting a lot of guys in the trenches, and then we got a kicker, which we needed, which I felt like was a super underrated need, because I also do another podcast that's called the AFC North Talk with all of the guys, and Austin Seibert came from Cleveland. There was a guy that literally got on my show called Quincy Carrier. He's a huge Browns YouTuber. He literally has videos dedicated to how bad Austin Seibert is. So when we signed him, I was worried because I was like, this guy is worse than Randy Bullock.
Hey, did you notice that they had the Austin Seibert jerseys in the pro shop and stuff like right when the draft started?
Yes. And the Trey Hopkins ones.
Yeah, right. I was like, what's that about? I just want to point out another comment. Michael Jordan, not Michael Jordan. That's Michael Jordan's brother. Said, please show us that white jersey, Anthony. I asked Anthony the same thing. Because it's a lot of people out here that still don't have the jersey, bro. Like that's mixing. That's the white mixing. That's special right there.
Yeah, it's nice. My gift from my brother. So thanks to him. Pretty cool. I'm stoked on it. Fits nice. I like it.
Right, but for me, it's an A- just because of the trenches. I mean, I really loved the Tyler Chauvin pick. I just imagine, like, I'm not gonna say that he's gonna make the roster, but I just imagine Renell Wren and him sitting next to each other and just daring anybody to like try to run the ball on that, because you just have two massive human beings there. I love that. The Trey Hill, as you guys said, I love that as well. The more I read up on Chris Evans, the more that I like him. He was a guy that kind of flew under the radar because I think he got suspended or something like that, some kind of academic mistake, quote unquote, that they had. I mean, I'm not expecting these guys to be world scholars. I mean, they're professional athletes. So that just equaled to me, let's tread on the tires. And it seemed like Zach was really excited about him. At first, I thought he was going to be primarily a special teams guy. From what Zach Taylor said in his press conference, sounded like a guy that could fit the Geo role. And now they just picked up Puka as well. So I just saw them throw a lot of darts at positions of need. And I love what they did with it. So for me, I'm actually going to give it A- because I'm just going on Willie and his faith in Jackson Carman. And I know that they're also going to have Willie working with Jackson Carman this offseason as well. And I just think that, and I also saw Chris Sims say that he felt like Carman was the second best guard in the draft. So for me, I'm just going to pretend that Carman is going to work out. He's going to be a average to above average guard. And that's all we really needed on this team and on this line. And with that, you add in Jamar Chase, of course. The LSU offense is essentially in effect. We got that. Miles, he was calling for Terrace Marshall at one point during the draft. You got Joey B. I mean, the sky is just the limit. I mean, the trenches are fixed to me. You got Jamar Chase. That's the icing on the cake. And I just really want to see what this team does. But they got a big nucleus of champions and apparently Tigers, LSU and Clemson Tigers, pretty much 10% of the 2019 national championship matchup is pretty much on this team. And I'm here for it.
Keep that same energy all season, Ace, because they're gonna be like, Ace, you remember after the draft, you were saying that we came out of there with an A-. Don't you back up on us now?
Well, I mean, obviously with drafts, you gotta wait until 3 years, but as of now, I gotta say what I gotta say. I mean, there was a time where I think I went back to 2015 and I loved the Paul Dawson pick. I hated the CJ Uzoma pick. So I mean, you never know.
Yeah, funny how that worked out, right? Usually when the Bengals end up trading back and getting more picks and all that kind of stuff, I go, oh man, a lot of these guys aren't going to make the roster. They're not going to help out. I feel a little bit differently about, even though they gained 2 more picks, I just feel like there's more competition and more openings for these guys to actually come in and contribute, and that's kind of what makes me excited about it. I think if I had some knocks, I wanted the Bengals to draft a kicker. I think 5th is maybe a little early, but hey, if that's the guy they want, I'm sure Darren Simmons pounded the table for that kid. And the other thing with it is I would have liked to maybe had one more true pass catcher later on day 3, maybe another wide receiver that was sitting out there, maybe a tight end, something like that. But I mean, like we said, guys, I mean, I just kind of feel like needs are met and there weren't a lot of reaches, and even ones that if you want to consider Jackson Carman a reach, they got 2 picks for it by moving back and getting them. So it's just kind of like I didn't see them really stumbling over their own feet like we've seen a couple of times in the past. This is a good segue for Chris Evans, because you mentioned that they didn't add another true pass catcher. Chris Evans came to Michigan as a slot receiver. Yep. I don't know where I think he was from Indianapolis or something like that. But I mean, he came to Michigan in 2016. He was originally a receiver. He transitioned to running back and he averaged like over 5 yards or like 6 yards a carry for the first 3 seasons. And like Ace mentioned, he was suspended for the entire 2019 season due to an academic mistake. During that suspension, he worked 3 jobs in Ann Arbor: a carpenter, a dishwasher, and a special teams coordinator at a local high school. And he was really credited for handling that whole suspension well. As soon as I read up on that, and then someone hit me up about a couple weeks ago that the Bengals were interviewing Evans multiple times over Zoom, I knew that there was a connection there. I knew that they were going to love his character, and the fact that Ace mentioned he only has 320 carries under his belt. And even though he's on the older side, like, he's fresh and he's not necessarily just a running back, even though I think he's great in pass protection. He fills that geo role well. But since they didn't add another receiver, they don't really have a true replacement for Alex Erickson. I think he does get a lot of snaps at slot in the preseason. He can carve out a little niche role there and definitely make the roster at the end of the day. That's a great point.
Right. To watch some of the guys, though, that was one of the things that kind of hurt me, I think, watching the draft. Is like some of the guys that, and I tweeted this too, I think, is that some of the guys that I like, watching them go to our opposition and seeing like a Tywan Wallace late just sitting right there, or Darden sitting right there. People that I just think like some impact players, or like guys that I just know in my heart of hearts could have, you needed an Alex Erickson replacement somewhere. Like I know people don't think that's a big deal, but the special teams took a big hit this offseason. So like one of the things coming in this draft is I was like, I knew that they had to trade back at some point to get some picks. And to see a lot of those guys, go, it was a little frustrating. And I think that's where it kind of curves my grade a little bit too, because I'm like, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'll say that. But if they can utilize people like Evans, like they haven't before, like that's something that I'm going to be looking for, because they have to get every single thing that they can out of these guys. But I think the theme of this draft is we're going to stockpile in these areas. And we don't have to hit, with the exception of Carmen. He has to hit. Like there is no excuses for him. But the exception to that, I feel like they have opportunities to say, okay, this guy may or may not work. Just like they did with linebacker last year. A lot of people say, why didn't they draft because JOK was sitting on the board and they could have got JOK at one point early in there. And I know they love Notre Dame prospects. So I think the way that they did it, I see their philosophy and I see how it could work. It gives them opportunity for guys to not hit and they still be fine, and we never have to go back to it. That was part of the Jamar Chase thing to me, and I was telling Ace that on his live stream too. It's like we have our core trio. We don't have to come back for a premium pick like a wide receiver for a while. Like the next 3 years is locked in. These are our 3 guys. If you go and get some slot later on or whatever, I think that once they got the Chase, it just set the tone. Mike Thomas getting signed before the draft itself, it kind of sent out a signal like, okay, well, this is the replacement. So some of these things gave me clarity as we went along. But I think they made their core defensive front. They made their core wide receiver just by getting Chase. They made core positions like a thing of strength, maybe for the future, maybe not immediately. But it gives them room. So next year, if you believe in the Bengals, then you're saying, okay, they'll be drafted in the middle of the pack or 20-something. But we know that's a corner. I think they set themselves up for winning later on based on the picks that I had. And I was telling Ace too, I talked to a player not too long ago and he outlined 4 games where they absolutely got their ass kicked up front. And I think Zach Taylor was he was recapping the whole draft, and he said, look, we just couldn't have that happen again. He didn't say this, I'm paraphrasing, but they couldn't come out there with Freedom. What's the other kid?
Amani Bledsoe.
Amani Bledsoe, another dude off the street that hurt us. I couldn't tell y'all that at press conferences, but that hurt us really, really bad. and we decided we're never going to let that happen again. And for the average fan that's just sitting at home saying, "Give me more offensive line. Why aren't you drafting Trey Smith?" Like that's a different perspective that I think people needed to hear too. Is that really hurt this staff and that hurt this team, and they just made a conscious decision that we're not going to go down that road again.
And the other thing, go ahead, John.
Just real quick, after they drafted Shelvin, I counted up. They had 14 defensive linemen on the roster. They usually carry 14 to 15 when they enter training camp, and that's after like a couple undrafted free agent signings. And Freedom and Amani are still part of that, and they may get outed. So the entire group, complete upheaval aside from like DJ and Sam Hubbard. That's very clear.
Definitely. I was gonna say the other thing too is they're still not done yet. When me and Zim were watching the post-draft interview with Zach, someone asked him, "Are you still going to sign players in free agency?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, there's positions that we didn't address that we will still be signing free agents for." And they were like, "Which positions?" And he was like, "Well, I'm not going to give you all of that." And he started to laugh. So it's very interesting to kind of think like they didn't take a tight end, they didn't take a corner, they didn't take a linebacker, so
take that late wide receiver that I just knew was coming. That never came.
So yeah, it's interesting to see who those guys will be that they're looking at. And if I'm not mistaken, and John, you might know this, I believe the deadline for the compensatory picks to count ends on Monday or something like that. Like if you sign a free agent or a UFA or unrestricted free agent, I believe on Monday it no longer counts as a compensatory pick or anything like that, which in the past has caused them from pursuing guys because back when they got picked up Brandon LaFell, that's one of the reasons that they waited so long to pick him up. So I'm interested to see who else they pick up. Were there any UDFAs or anything that you guys were looking into, like that they should go after? Or
someone said that Sage Surratt, the Wake Forest wide receiver, that guy interests me. I just kind of took a quick peek. I think this is as of a couple of weeks ago.
Marvin Wilson. I want Marvin Wilson.
Yeah.
The Browns.
Oh, he did? Okay.
I think
Marvin Wilson signed?
Yeah, I think someone did say he signed with the Browns. Yeah.
Right. At the beginning, Dylan Moses.
Let's get into that. What do you guys think about, like, I don't know if you know per se all of the picks. I remember like keeping a little eye on the division. What do you guys think of like the rest of the division? For me personally, I know Zim, y'all gonna fry me again. That Browns draft kind of scared me, bro. Like for them to get JOK and to get Newsome, and I think they had another pick. I think it was Ben Cleveland or the Ravens got Cleveland.
No, the Browns.
I'm not gonna lie. Some of those picks by even the Steelers with Najee Harris and stuff like that, those were picks where I feel like the rest of the division did good too. The Ravens finally trying to get some receivers. You talked about it was his name Tywon Johnson.
Tywon Wallace.
You
know what's so crazy? He works so well. I think he's gonna work so well, and I hate it that's the perfect wide receiver for Jamar. I mean.
For Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson, Carmen.
Lamar Jackson. I was about to say Jamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I think I'll have to look at it, but man, all I can say is Cleveland is loading up on defense. Like from free agency to the draft, they're loading up, but I think they also have to load up for us. But I think the rest of the division has some solid drafts as well. I still think, like, even talking to some of the guys around the division, they felt like we were in the driver's seat to have the best draft, and I think they were saying that in general. But a lot of them, just like our fans said, they thought if we would have taken Tevin Jenkins instead, that we would have been the big winners of the draft to be able to get Jamar Chase and Tevin Jenkins in the second round.
I think it's interesting. I don't know if it was intentional or not by some of these teams, but there was kind of this chess match going on in the division. You see Jamar Chase get drafted by the Bengals at 5. What do the Browns do? Greg Newsome, right? And then you see the Bengals loading up on some defensive linemen, doing some things on defense, and lo and behold, teams in the division kind of getting some offensive linemen and doing some things that way. The Bengals obviously doing things on the defensive line, not only to be able to rush the passer more effectively, no matter who they play, but getting bodies and getting athletic people up front to be able to defend Lamar Jackson and the multidimensional approach that he brings. The thing is, guys, I was saying this. I think it was actually to my parents earlier because they were asking me what's going on with the draft. So I was talking to them, and I said, number one, I think if the Bengals, no matter how many times they lose in 21 and beyond, they're going to lose fun. I mean, they're going to put up points. There's not going to be these 35-9 type of lopsided scores against the Steelers and the Ravens like we've seen over the past couple of years, but I do think that with these moves, they've intentionally, I know the goal is, like John and I have talked about, the goal is to get past those Chiefs, kind of emulate what they do. But I mean, that for the first step to that is to get through the AFC North and really compete with the big brothers in there. And I think that, I think that some of these picks kind of exude the attitude of, hey, we're doing what we can to get past these guys, because really in the past couple of years, those big games against the Steelers and the Ravens, they stomped the Bengals. And even when Joe Burrow was in a couple of those games, they stomped them, and they both on offense and defense. So they needed to make some big changes. And I feel like the Bengals strategically approached the draft to do that, but the response by some of these teams too, and the players that they picked after the Bengals picked some players, I kind of know, I took note of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the division, like when we grabbed Joey B, that put the entire rest of the division on notice. And, there were ways that they could attack us, but with us beefing up in the trenches and us getting guys like Jamar Chase, like you said, Cleveland went out and got a corner. You saw them start to get offensive linemen. You see the Ravens try to get receivers, because if you're going to have to compete with this offense potentially, and we're outgunning you, you're going to have some pass catchers to throw to other than just Mark Andrews. Like, that's just not going to cut it. You're not going to be able to be the 2005 or 2007 Atlanta Falcons and just run it to death against this defense, especially with us taking guys like the nose tackle out of LSU. And it's just going to be interesting, man. This is a great division. I think, honestly, the AFC North is the best division in football. It's going to be a battle, and I can't wait to see it. But I do think that we do have the number one receiving core in the division, hands down now, especially with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. We have something that is the best in the AFC North at this moment, and I think we got some building blocks to build on, honestly.
I think they looked at 2005, just like I tell you all the time, and I think they just said, what are the, when they were designing the jerseys, they said, like, what are some moments in Bengals history that we've had the most success in? Anybody will tell you, like, that 2005 team just couldn't be stopped. And I think a lot of the different things that they've done have created like the foundation for some of those things. Like, to try to emulate something is very, very tough, especially in professional sports. But I think a lot of the different you spoke about the wide receiver trios. That's the one thing that really stood out. And every time I would tell TJ that, he was like, yeah, but the line. Like, we would never be anything like without the line, So I think they made a really conscious effort to go get the same kind of profile guys to be, nasty in the trenches up front. And, that's the biggest thing that I wanted everyone to understand. It's like, just because Chase is a flashier pick doesn't mean that your whole draft is lost or it's flashy. And I think they proved that, we're going to stockpile these different areas and we're going to beef it up. I'm looking at the Ravens draft as you were saying it too. They went first round. Oh, damn, I had it pulled up. They had first round, they went Bateman, which I hated. Then they went Jason from Penn State, the linebacker. Then they went Ben Cleveland. Then they went corner heavy. So,
Sean Wade, I thought that was impressive that they got Sean Wade in the fifth. I didn't like that.
Right, they got Sean Wade in the fifth. They got Tywan Wallace. So one thing I told you, Ace, I said before the draft, it's so many things that we've talked about on our show that actually just really happened. I said the Ravens, if they're going to exercise Lamar's fifth-year option, the only way that they could really gauge, is this the guy forever? Like, I don't even know why they would still be asking that question. But let's say that they were, because there are a lot of people that don't believe in him. You had to go get him some type of weapons, and I think they did a really good job of adding the weapons that they added at the spots that they did. And then to Anthony's point is they came back with corner heavy. Like, it's some really valuable spots. So I think, the division is no joke, bro. Like, it's like, I think a lot of Bengals fans will probably look at it from a Bengals glass, the Bengals goggles on or whatever. I know John never looks at anything with Bengals goggles on, but yeah, they did some stuff that I think to combat us, because I kept on yelling and screaming at everybody saying, when are we going to do some stuff that's going to make everybody come back and come back and do something based on what us? Because we saw Lamar Jackson go out there. What do we do? Draft 3 athletic linebackers that could keep up with him, right? So now we see the division like, oh, okay, they want to load up at wide receiver. Okay, let's get our corners. Because Ravens arguably have like top 5 corners in the NFL. They just loaded up even more. And that's one of the things I kept on saying. It's like, okay, we're going to dictate personnel. I think they made a conscious effort too to get corners that can tackle in space as well. So I thought that was very telling to Anthony's point, like Cleveland and Ravens clearly. Pittsburgh, I mean, they did what Pittsburgh did. I mean, baby Gronk, they're always going to have a baby Gronk though. Pat, I can't pronounce his last name. Pat Frymuth.
I don't know.
But they're always going to have a baby Gronk, and they're always going to work in that system, and we're always going to hate those guys. And it is what it is, And Najee Harris, they everybody and their mom had him mocked him. My mom doesn't even watch football, and she probably is like, yeah, I bet you the Squirrels are going to get Najee Harris because it was already written. So it's like one of them things. It's like I knew it was happening. I know my Steelers fans. I run a Bengals versus Steelers page. He texts me immediately, and he's like, "Yeah, here we come," and here we come, and throwing yellow memes and stuff at me and all that crap.
I don't want to cut you off, Zim, and I don't want to step on John because I think he had something to say. But I just thought it was really interesting in terms of the Steelers draft. It just kind of seemed, the Bengals were playing a little need based in terms of their who they picked in their first couple of picks. But it really, really seemed for a team that's picking in the 20s and the perennial powerhouse that Pittsburgh is, their picks were really driven by need. To me, it seemed that way. They needed a running back. They lost Connor. They don't have Le'Veon Bell anymore. They needed a running back. They want to be ground and pound, especially in the last couple of years of Ben's career. They wanted to go offensive line. They wanted to get that tight end. They got their next Heath Miller probably, right? I mean, a guy that we're going to hear Muth probably, right? When every time that guy catches a football. So it just felt like theirs for a team that was picking late just seemed a little bit more need based, and that struck me as a little odd.
I mean, for starters, the Browns draft was really good. The Anthony Schwartz pick is bizarre. It's a little bit early for that, but I mean that's exactly the type of receiver that they needed. The Browns are just really good. They should be the favorites to win the division going forward. It's really up to just Baker Mayfield just being more than who he is. And like the Ravens and Steelers, like they could be like treading water a little bit, but like they're still ahead of the Bengals, and the Bengals are playing catch up, and that's more or less why I think Zim said this the best leading up to the draft. Chase is the way that you fast track that progress, right? Because you can commit to building that 2005 offensive line, but that takes a shit ton of resources and probably multiple years to get it to that level. Or you could just add another receiver. You can go out and get a free agent in Riley Reef. You can go out and get a second round guard, and you can fast track that progress. And I think, and with the Ravens, it was funny how they were so unsuccessful in signing a receiver. They went up to get Galladay. They tried to get some. I think Juju was in the mix too. They just settled on Sammy Watkins. So you knew they were going to add some receivers because they did need to add to that as well. But I think it's funny how this draft in this offseason has a level of symmetry to last year, because the Bengals' biggest need last year was linebacker. We all expected them to invest in free agency. They whiffed on Schobert and maybe another guy, and they settled on Josh Bynes. And then they drafted 3 guys all throughout the draft to just fill the need. Just don't worry about it. This year, we expected them to be aggressive in offensive line. They whiff on some guys, 3 offensive line throughout the draft, fill that need, get the depth, right? It's funny how they always seem to find themselves in these same patterns whenever they address a certain need, because they're never going to be the team that shells out and gets a Joe Thuney or gets the best player at their biggest position of need. They always find a way to just fill it with depth and with quantity over quality. And at some point, it just has to work, and it has to hit in order for them to catch up to these other teams. Because Ace is right; this is the most competitive division in the NFL, and maybe neither of these 3 teams can compete with the Bills and the Chiefs. But I think the Bengals have set them up to be in that conversation if these things go right.
No, I'm with John on that. I think one thing I noticed just from working with the other guys around the AFC North, it was the first time that I actually had to watch all of our divisional opponents' games to truly evaluate that. Like I'm never.
Have you done a show with them? You haven't done a show with them after.
I haven't. I've gotten their thoughts on certain stuff because they pulled in and out. But the one thing that I noticed is that Joe Burrow is the key to us beating all of these other teams. I truly believe that and people call me crazy because Lamar Jackson won an MVP. Joe Burrow to me can just do different things that he can't do. And I think like John was hinting at, we can do things that some of those teams can't do. In terms of offensively putting up points, you talk about Jamar Chase, you talk about Joe Burrow. I truly believe that he's the X factor. The Browns, like John is saying, yeah, they're at the top right now. The thing that's the secret weapon for me to strike them is when Baker Mayfield has to get paid $40 million a year. Whenever they're going to have to do that, whenever they're going to have to pay him that big boy money, that is the time for us to pounce on them because a lot of that talent that they have around him, they won't be able to afford. And the clock is also ticking on Lamar Jackson as well. They're going to have to give him Pat Mahomes type money, and that's going to cause them to lose a lot of those players. And that's the difference between them and us because when we give Joey B that money, he's a guy that can elevate this entire team. We're already going to have those guys locked in, and we're going to be in a much better position investing in Joe Burrow than investing that Joe Burrow type money in someone like Baker Mayfield. And that's not to talk down on Baker Mayfield, but he's just not Joe Burrow to me, and he's not going to elevate the team once that talent gets away from him.
Yeah, hard to disagree. And I think one of the things we talked about Friday, and I think Zim, when you came on after the Chase pick, when we did the reaction, one of the things that'll negate the pass rush and these quarterback hits on Burrow that we saw last year is the ability to be a little bit more of a spread look offense with all of these weapons out there and the ability to get all these weapons out there. And yeah, they shored up the offensive line with the three guys they brought in and Riley Reif and Quentin Spain that they brought in free agency. But the ability to really have, true three true weapons at wide receiver immediately, maybe even more. You throw in this Chris Evans kid, maybe in the slot, like John mentioned, maybe he can be, an Antonio Gibson light type of player. You can do a lot of different things with him. And, you're able to kind of spread it out and keep a defense on its heels a bit more rather than this kind of tee off type of situation. And obviously you've fortified things up front. So when the Bengals play these teams, I'm very optimistic that we're not going to see the amount of hits, the amount of sacks, and we're not going to see these, especially against the Ravens and the Steelers. Like I said before, I'm optimistic that even if the Bengals lose, there's not going to be this ridiculously lopsided score. There's going to be that there is a significant closing of the gap between the Bengals and what they've been the past couple of years comparative to the Steelers and the Ravens. I know the Bengals beat the Steelers late last year. I remember. I didn't forget it. But I'm just saying I think we've seen quite a few in the last 2-3 seasons where the Bengals have been absolutely shellacked by Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And I think what they've been trying to build here and in the draft this year, I think they've been able to achieve something where their offense is going to give them a much different look than they've had in the past couple of seasons and hopefully, close that gap, maybe being able to split games in the division a little more frequently than they have been able to do so.
Yeah, I think they put a lot of – I'm going to tell you just one thing too. I was talking to Ace earlier today too. We have a lot of conversations before we even talk. And I think that's what allows us to wing it on these shows so damn much. But the pressure is going to be on Lou Anarumo very, very early because I went back and counted acquisitions since he's been the coach. And then we're talking about now, like what we just did in this draft and coming with that defensive front. And what made me bring that up, somebody in the comments said, what about Geno? We can still get it. I feel like they 100% went full in on Lou Anarumo's project to the point where people like Geno, like, kiss that goodbye. Like they just drafted way too many people at that position now, where a person like Geno wouldn't even come in. Like this is full on you. If Joe is moving the chains and the defense fails to make consistent stops early in the season, based on all of the acquisitions that they've given Lou Anarumo, it puts a lot of pressure on him to be the first, as we've seen with Terrell Austin and some of these other guys, whatever, like the pressure's on him early on. And I just think that's one of the things I'm going to be checking out early in the season. Is like, I'm not looking for Joe Burrow to throw 40-plus times just because I have Jamar Chase. You cannot pay Joe Mixon that amount of money and not have him heavily involved in the scene. I don't care if it's Will Rouse. I don't care if it's just any type of misdirection stuff that they want to do for him, whatever. They have to get very creative with Joe Mixon to make it make sense with the money-wise. And as they learn in the year one of Joe Burrow project, you don't have the ability to take that many chances at Joe Burrow dropping back that many times early in his career like that. So year one is gotta be about this defense stepping up in some very, very key spots, because Joe Burrow cannot bail you out every single time you go down by a X amount of points coming fresh off of ACL surgery. I'm down 14 points. I can't just have Joe Burrow throwing it, 40-plus times a game. And so that's what I think ultimately puts a lot of pressure on him. This team cannot go down. They cannot go down with big margins early in games and stuff and expect Joe Burrow to come in here just because we have these weapons and just unload it and unleash hell. Now that's coming. I see a lot of people in the crowd that feel like my soul. I'm going to put 40 on you. And I'm going to, that's me. I'm all about that. I want to drop points. And like Anthony said, if I lose, I want to lose with some points on the board. But you got to be smart and think about, we got a lot riding on this. If year one didn't teach us that, a Team Chase CEO guy right here telling you that, you don't have the luxury to just say, I'm going to drop back 50 times with this guy, because it's too much on the line, and they got to be able to have the defense back them up, and they cannot afford to go down in these games. Based off of all of this stuff that I've seen, they've given him a lot of different pieces.
I'm sorry, Ace, but I don't – when you win comfortably, you don't throw the ball 40 times a game. Right. And you don't win comfortably anymore without throwing the ball successfully. It's going to depend on how successful those first 20, 25 passes are. You don't want the bulk of your passing production coming from attempts 26 through 40. I think that's a misconception, because people are like, don't have Burrow drop back 50 times. That only happens if your defense is giving up points. Right. You have to keep up with that. That's how you score, and that's how you win comfortably. And I think it was also cool to hear offense coordinator Brian Callahan after the Chris Evans pick. I think someone asked him about the rotation going forward with Mixon, and he made a comment saying, I don't want to take Mixon off the field anymore. And I didn't take that as they're going to run Mixon into the dirt like Todd Gurley. I took that as they're going to use Mixon multiple ways. They're going to use him as a receiver. Mm-hmm. They're going to get multiple running backs on the field, which should have been the plan all along. And I'm glad it is the plan now that they have $48 million attached to his name.
Right. No, that's real. I was just gonna say, for everybody watching live, whether it's on the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel or Zim Huday's YouTube channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We got over 400 people watching live now. If you're watching us through the Cincy Jungle Facebook, please be sure to leave us a like there. And you can also find this, if you're listening to this, under the Cincy Jungle podcast. So wherever you get your podcast, we're going to have this on audio form. We've got a ton of draft content, whether it's from the OBI, Matt Minnick, the Orange is the New Black podcast. We're all under there. We're all loaded with content, and we would love to have you guys listening. I see a lot of you guys excited here in the chat, so just wanted to make sure. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Get fired up then. I'm kind of glad that Matt isn't here, because every time he's on here, I always have to be like, you know what, let me put some bass in my voice. And this is the first time I get to talk to you guys and really talk, because Matt sounds like Barry White every damn time he's like kicking my ass on here or whatever. I can really talk like how I really talk. Like, thanks, Matt.
Well, that's all I had. Was there anything that you guys wanted to discuss before we get out of here? I know we're all tired from the draft. There's been a lot of content coming out. Well, guys, thank you for listening. This has been the Cincy Jungle Super Draft Show post-draft. And as usual, we're going to leave you guys with a Houday.
Hello, world. What separated your deep ball from everybody else?
My deep ball, it has a little secret sauce to it, man.
Never get too high, never get too low, but just keep moving.
The whole story